Welcome to the C.S. Joseph Podcast. I'm your host, Samuel Nicodemus, INTP, and today I'm presenting the Acolyte question: what is the difference between ESFP subconscious developed and unconscious developed? Before I get into how ESFPs vary on that, I'm going to explain the concept of subdeveloped versus unconscious developed. In the past, we would say that people were focused, like Bill Gates is a INTP, unconscious focused, meaning he has more development in the ENTJ unconscious. Notice how I said developed. We have now the concept of development and focus. Focus being right now and develop being the past. So you can see how Bill Gates, INTP, business structure, is like, okay, he had a past where he's using a lot of TE and introverted intuition and stuff like that. Meanwhile, you'll probably find like INTPs, like Mr. Beast, being like more giving with that extrovert feeling. And then the focus is another matter for another time, but it's basically the focus right now. And that's a lot harder to see than developed. Subdeveloped, subconscious developed, unconscious developed, unconscious development. Got it? Cool. In between these developments, we can generally see patterns like a subdeveloped person is more concerned about their happiness, and an unconscious developed person is more concerned about maturity, wisdom, and generally being content. Now let's get into how this works for ESFPs. ESFPs have an INTJ subconscious. ESFPs have their TE child and their introverted intuition inferior. And then within the subconscious, that basically becomes like a backup NI hero and TE parent. And due to this, they have like extra rationale compared to their unconscious developed ESFP counterparts, and they're more organized for it because that child function has more responsibility to it. They also have less fear of making decisions because they're more in tune with their introverted intuition. They're not as scared of what they want, they just kind of are like a little bit better at it. And speaking of that introverted intuition, that freedom, they're not going to give that up. That's going to be a thing that is pretty noticeable across those two variants, is that subdeveloped ESFPs will not give up their freedom. And they also have a tendency to be more ragey, because they don't have as much introvert sensing discipline to, keep themselves simmered down. It's like one ESFP that I enjoy watching is the YouTuber Jay Schlatt, where he has his funny rage moments where he takes like keyboards and he'll smash them on the table, but he doesn't even use the one that he has. Like, I think at first he did, but he eventually just like kept a box of them like right next to him, very organized, and he'd just break them because he's like, well, it's not that important that it's my keyboard being broken, it's just a keyboard is being broken. Part of them doubling down on their ego functions is that they are not holding back at all with their extrovert sensing. Like, they do go out of their way to perform like an extra amount, and they also have some of that like introverted intuition dominant, like jealousy and clinginess to them. And they have like this issue where they're extra sensitive to praise, and some of that has to do with the deadly sin with ESFPs and INTJs, the vainglory, and they need that bit of reverence to them, like highly regarded. They also have a problem where they conflate feelings for facts, which is like, their introverted feeling kind of blocking out some of that, this is true, this is false, which is, kind of cringe for me as a TI hero. But on the bright side, though, they are more willing to listen and ask questions compared to their unconscious developed counterparts. That's a plus. Part of them being more developed in their INTJ side of the mind, like a finisher type, they're more likely to start and finish their projects more often. And because that INTJ side is pragmatic, as well as their ego, they're like one-man wrecking crews. Chris Taylor introduced the temples a while back, and they're just kind of like based on the quadras and what they're all about. The ego of the ESFP is concerned about passion, things like human expression and like drama and those types of things, where ESFPs kind of specifically are about performance, extrovert sensing hero and all. But you'll see that like with developments of the mind, you'll see that there's a little bit of playing with other temples. So a subdeveloped ESFP is going to have a stronger concern about their legacy, about creation. And then you can see that how that kind of performance, like the manifestation of a performance, would double up on that passion, kind of a sense of happiness. And I'd like to take a second that if you're kind of stuck on subconscious development, unconscious development stuff for yourself, might I recommend you go and get typed by C.S. Joseph himself. If you go to csjoseph.life/coaching, you'll get typed by C.S. Joseph or J. Ackley, and you'll be verified, so you don't have to be as worried about, is this really my type or not? Because I thought I was an INFP, and I'm not. And then when Octagram came out, I thought I was like subdeveloped for sure. Like I considered myself on the more happy-go-lucky end, and then only recently being unconscious focused. But no, I'm unconscious developed, unconscious focused. The type that we would used to call superego focused. Yeah, I was very shocked by that, and you might be shocked by your results too. So csjoseph.life/coaching. Alright, back to the unconscious developed ESFPs. So as I mentioned with subdeveloped ESFPs, they're kind of more immature. And notice how most of the examples I did was that they're using their child more and their inferior more, and as a result that kind of makes them more happy. But the fun thing about ESFPs using their ISFJ side of the mind is that, they're more balanced and more mature, because they are implementing new functions that they don't use by default. So they have more introvert sensing and more extrovert feeling. Why am I saying more? It's just they are using those functions. And of course there's different mixes and matches to them, but let's just say the introvert sensing and extrovert feeling are more at the ready to be used. As well as also they have just the Crusader Quadra mentalities to them as well. So that kind of like evens them out a little bit. Like for example, they aren't as ragey as the subdeveloped ESFPs because they have introvert sensing discipline to simmer them down a bit. Part of the ISFJ side of the mind being affiliative is that they have a mentality that doing the right thing can actually matter, and they are willing to sacrifice their freedom if it's the right thing to do. And that can be pretty handy, and let's face it, more mature in some regards, like having a job that you might not want, but you get to keep on living. Part of them having introvert sensing discipline is that they are willing to put some more effort into the projects that they're working on as opposed to the subdeveloped ESFPs. They also get some Crusader mentalities where any of the favors that they do have strings attached to them. We say on the channel a lot covert contracts where you're essentially I'm going to do you a favor, but now you owe me a favor, but I'm not going to tell you what that favor is until I need it. And then I'm going to be offended that if you don't want to do the favor, which it's kind of okay, that's not good. I've definitely been guilty of that. But, that's part of that systematic extrovert feeling approach to things. And as well as that is capable of, being kind of cheap and transactional with a lot of their favors. It's not as much of oh, I want to do this. It's just kind of trying to get a leg up. And they also have, they're not doubling down their vainglory deadly sin, but they get a little bit of envy injected into them when they're shadow focused, or unconscious developed, and they can get very vengeful and have some unfair treatment. And then as I mentioned that subdeveloped ESFPs have a concern for the body temple, you'll find that the unconscious developed ESFPs have a concern for the character temple, or I guess it's the soul temple. The temple that's concerned about character. And it'll be about, like, identity. And it'll kind of be about improving other people as well. So if you notice that being a thing with the ESFP, that's probably a sign that they're unconscious developed. So it's not totally that, like, oh, mature better, immature better type of thing. There's definitely trade-offs between these types. But I hope that gave some clarity into how subdeveloped and unconscious developed ESFPs operate, and that hopefully you can start distinguishing them, or you can distinguish yourself a bit better. Catch me on the Discord, and I'll see you guys in another podcast episode. Take care.